course, to Yochanan for the Torah reading. So, the last few weeks, we have been reading in the Torah sort of the elaborate steps that have been taken by the Israelites to build this tabernacle, this portable sanctuary. And this was a sanctuary that they were supposed to worship God during their 40 years in the wilderness. And these steps to build this portable sanctuary included the donation of an assortment of goods and materials, as well as the donation of skilled labor. Now, to obtain that skilled labor, what does Moses do? He asks that all among you who are chacham lev, and we heard this term this morning in the Torah, chacham lev, shall come forward and shall help the construction of the tabernacle. Chacham lev. What exactly is chacham lev, and what was perhaps Moses or the Torah referring to when it uses this term? Well, for those of you who speak Hebrew, you'll know, or Yiddish, that chacham or a chacham, as you might know it, means smart. Or at least acting smart, if not really smart. A chacham is a brace of chacham, you know. But a chacham really means somebody who's smart. And lev, of course, as you know, means heart. So you put the two words together and you literally get a smart heart. Smart heart. What's a smart heart? And why does the Torah put these two words together to to create this particular term? Now, if you look at our Chumash, as you were reading this morning, it translates chacham lev as skilled. Moses asked for all who are skilled. But do you really think that skilled is a good translation of chacham lev? I don't buy it. Which is why I want to give you a slightly different definition of this term, which is quite different from the word skilled. But in order to do so, I have to compare it to another term that we read about this morning over and over again. Yochanan, poor guy, had to keep repeating it. And that was, of course, the word nediv lev. Nediv lev, which I'm going to translate as generous heart. Okay, nediv. Nedavai comes from the same term, somebody who's generous, lev of heart. So we've got here generous heart. Now the Israelites were asked to donate the raw materials to furnish the tabernacle. There was no tax, there was no membership required, there were no other requirements given other than those who had hearts were inclined to give. This is what Nadiv Lev means. Somebody who had a good heart was asked to give as much as you can. A generous heart. And the people, they were obviously people full of Nadiv Lev because they gave and they gave and they gave. And they donated much more than was needed for the building of this portable sanctuary. So what happened next? Okay, Moses actually had to ask the people to stop giving. Have you ever heard of such a thing? This was the first and the only time in all of Jewish history that a leader had to stop asking the Jews for donations because they had too much. That's a whole different story. We'll get to it some other time. Only then, after receiving enough donations, Moses did something very strange. It was only at that time that he called on those who were a chacham lev to now come forward and begin doing the work of the construction. What do I need somebody who's a chacham for to do this? I need somebody who's, got good abs and he's got good, he can use a hammer, use nails, use a power drill, a saw. I don't need somebody who's a chacham lev. So now what do? We have here two parallel phrases, and we have two groups of individuals. On the one hand, we have those who are Nadiv Lev, and on the other hand, we have those who are Chacham Lev. Two different types of Jews. Shocking, huh? Actually, two different types of Jews, okay? It started even back then. But this raises a very obvious question. Why didn't Moses ask those who are Nadiv Lev to also engage in the construction of the process? Why did he exclude the Nadiv Lev and only have the Chacham Lev come forward? Why didn't he allow everyone who wanted to participate in this important mitzvah? Instead, Moses only wanted and only called upon those who were Chacham Lev to participate. So with this as a background, we can now turn to what I believe is a much better definition of a Chacham Lev than skilled, and how it impacts us today. As we saw with the people's donations, when asked, individuals can be extremely, extremely generous. They can be big-hearted. That is Nadiv Lev. And we want to encourage everyone to be Nadiv Lev, to give out of a generosity of their hearts. But just as Moses had to stop the giving, so do we have to understand that having a big heart, A, might not be enough, and B, is not always what is needed under the circumstances. And that's because some people have the very, very best intentions. They have a big heart, but sometimes they don't use that heart wisely. They let their emotions overwhelm them, and their good intentions sometimes lead to bad results. Look at last week's Torah portion, for example. We had the story of the golden calf. The Israelites happily and eagerly donated their valuables to the building of the Egel HaZahav, of the golden calf. But it didn't stop to think. Perhaps they wanted to join in on the bandwagon. Perhaps they wanted the kavod of being a big donor. You know, a gevir, name on the top of the board there. Or perhaps they just got swayed by their emotions. In any case, they let their Nadiv Lev, their emotions, get the better of them. So this week, Moses senses, hold on a second, the same thing is beginning to happen again. The Israelites are once again letting their generosity get the better of them. They're donating their possessions at such an alarming rate that I've got to, says Moses, I've got to stop them. And he's fearful. He's fearful that they might lose sight of what they're actually doing. And more importantly, why they are doing it. He might fear that the tabernacle might turn into another golden calf, God forbid, or even a Taj Mahal. And so Moses calls time out. He says, no more donations. Now that certainly got the people's attention. All of a sudden they sort of sobered up. And then he says, for part 2 of the project, for the actual building part, I don't want or need anybody who is one of the givers. I only want those who have, in addition to a Nadiv Lev, a good heart, who have a Chacham Lev, who are also smart at heart. I only want those who aren't going to get caught up in the emotions of the moment, but who have actually thought about what they are doing here and why they are doing it. I want people who are willing to follow the directions that are given and build a tabernacle the way that God intended it. Not those who are just going to throw things together and be satisfied with whatever comes out. The other reason is sometimes that when people are big givers and they get involved, they feel that because they gave the biggest or gave the most, they should have a saying. Moses didn't want that. Now the time you've given, you're out, and the builders are in. The smart ones are in. Thank you for what you gave. We're grateful to you. And yes, you'll get a plaque with a nice picture with an engraving on the bottom. But no, you're out. And yes, of course, having a big heart is important. It's an important component in worshiping God. But Moses tells the people that worshiping God is not just about having a big heart. But God gave us a brain. And he gave us a brain for many reasons. And one reason is to curb the excesses of the heart. Think about how many Jews continually tell us, or they tell me anyway, I don't know about you, but they tell us that I'm a Jew at heart. I got a good heart. Or are seeking spirituality and believe that they can find it in the heart. If that's the case, they're missing the point. They might be big-hearted, but any cardiologist will tell you that a big heart is not good. Okay? It's very dangerous. You need a small heart with a strong muscle, okay? Some people think that they are big-hearted. And they might be Nadiv Lev, but they're missing out on what it means to be a Chacham Lev. They have a heart of wisdom, as did King Solomon in Ecclesiastes. He continually implores us to have a Chacham Lev, be smart, wisdom. That's the most important thing. They're missing out on key components in making one a complete person, the ability to use your brain as well as your heart. And they are missing out on the opportunity to build something together with others. Moses tells those people who thought that the Nadiv Lev, big heart, was the only way to God. He says, thank you for your generosity, it's much appreciated. But now we need people who are Chacham Lev, who know how to do the work, and will do the work without any emotions as they're told. So go, sit on the sidelines and watch and learn. Learn how to get a Chacham Lev for yourselves and see what happens when you do. You then too can participate in doing God's work. Moses is not telling the Israelites that worshiping God is only for the select few. Chas v'shalom. I've heard it many times in my career. People think that the more they give, the others feel that they gave more than you have a separate list, the A list and the B list. No, that's not what Moses is telling the Israelites, that worshiping God is only for the select few. He's not telling them that building the tabernacle can't be for everyone. On the contrary, he's telling us quite the opposite. Anyone and everyone can participate. There's just one requirement, though, and that is to use your brains as well as your heart. Use both. And yes, the two can work in tandem. When they do, the service of God is at its very best. As the late Lord Sachs, Zechet Tzaddik Livracha, wrote, Moses understood that you can turn disparate groups or even hostile factions into a single, cohesive group, so long as they are faced with a shared challenge that they can achieve together, but that no one person can do alone. And if you seek to create community out of strongly individualistic people, you first have to turn them into builders before anything else. And that is what Moses did in this week's Torah reading in Parshat Vayakhel. He was trying to get them to unite, to become builders. Team building, even after a disaster like the golden calf, is neither a mystery nor a miracle. It's done by setting the group a task, one that speaks to their passions and one that no subsection of the group can achieve alone. It must be constructive. Every member of the group must be able to make a unique contribution and then feel that it has been valued. Each must be able to say with pride, I helped make this. And that is what Moses understood, and that is what he did. He knew that if you want to build a team, create a team that builds. And that is precisely why I don't like the word skill to define Chacham Lev. Not everyone has the skill to engage in construction, particularly of the tabernacle. And that definition eliminates many people from the experience. But everyone can be a Chacham Lev. Everyone. Everyone has a brain. And everyone has something of value to contribute to the children of Israel, to the Jewish people, to their synagogue, to their community, and to God. Doesn't matter who it is, especially if we're all on the same page and want to build something real together. May we continue to live our lives with both Nadiv Lev and Chacham Lev. May we continue to be big-hearted not only towards God, but towards our fellow human beings, both in and out of our own community. And may we continue to use our brains as God intended, to curb knee-jerk reactions to outside stimuli. And finally, may we use our hearts, our minds, our bodies, and our souls to engage in building up rather than tearing down. Shabbat Shalom.